So when we talk about Arthur Richards, man, like what is like who were you in high school? Like you grew up in Florida?
Yeah, so I grew up in Orlando. I was born in Miami, Florida.
So how often did you go to
Moved
Disney
to,
World? How often do
and
Orlando
I
natives go to Disney World? Like
we
never?
don't go to Disney. We don't go to
Never?
Disney. We go to Disney when our relatives come and visit Florida, and they're like, "Hey, I want to go to Disney," and we drop them off at the front. They're like, "Yo, have fun." That's when we go to Disney.
just like every like yeah. If you live in a big city, you don't go to the tourist attractions until people come to visit you,
Yeah,
right? Nothing different, I
nah,
guess.
nah. Or you have children and like, their birthdays come up and you're like, you know what, I know you can get them free because it's your birthday,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, let's go, all right?
Right.
Or, I get the Florida discount, so maybe I'll, things like that. But
Okay.
yeah, we don't go too much.
But you said you were born in Miami.
Yeah, so I was born in Miami-Dade,
Hmm.
Wade County. Used to be Wade County. I don't know how I feel about D Wade anymore, but yeah, I was born out there, moved to Orlando, been in between Canada and Jamaica
Hmm.
quite a bit, Jersey as well, but mainly Orlando was home up
Hmm.
until high
Right.
school and university. And you asked a question, high school. I was actually just talking to a high school friend just the other day. I was just reconnecting with a few people. High school is horrible. I thoroughly disliked high school. It was the worst experience I ever had in my life.
What era of high school? Like, could you? I don't want you to date yourself. I'm a class of '99, by the way. Just so I'm putting it out there.
Mashallah, mashallah.
But what like era of high school? Like, generally speaking, when were you in high school?
So I was in HS, let's see, what now is maybe like 15, 16 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're probably like a 4 or 5 year class out after me. I want to say roughly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think
So
you.
it was,
Yeah. Mhm, go ahead. So yeah, you said it was like one of the worst experiences of your life.
I just really, really hated it. I didn't like high school. It was hard to find people that I could mesh with.
Mhm.
I grew up in an area that was very posh. And then I came from immigrants that really had to build themselves up, right?
Mhm.
Like significantly. Like my father grew up like living in a tree,
Mhm.
selling jerk chicken on the side of the street in Jamaica.
Mhm.
Um, and so like living in a place where a 16-year-old, his first car, he takes all his friends to go to the Bentley dealership and get a Bentley. And like, your family's coming from a certain type of background. It was kind of difficult in that regard. And then obviously me being black in terms of my color, but not being raised as an African American. I was raised being very Jamaican, which is very different than the African American experience.
Mhm.
So that also just it ain't help. It didn't
Mhm.
really help. It was quite difficult actually.
What's the demographic? How many? What would you say the white versus black demographic was in your high school,
Fam,
percentage
that
wise?
literally the town. I don't want to drop names or anything because I mean I actually probably no one would care. But so the town that's closest to the school is a place called Windermere, and Windermere has I think something like a 95% white demographic.
Okay.
Like it's like literally 95%. It might even be higher than that,
Okay.
right? Um, I think the only black people I had in there was Shaq and Tiger Woods. So Tiger Woods used to go to like the spot down the street,
Okay.
literally right in front of the school for his food, and that's what everyone found out when he did his little, stuff he was doing. Like, we
Okay.
were all like, that's the waitress. So yeah.
Right. Okay. And then, but you just say you just felt like an outsider for the most part, right? Were you like what were you interested in things like post-colonial theory, religion, and things like that in high school, or what were you interested in high school?
Books. My best friends were the librarians.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I got picked on a lot because I used to walk to classes, like literally would walk to classes with a book in front of my face. So
Mm,
that was how I tuned everyone out. And that's
mm,
also how I just lived in high school, just reading, 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 reading. So I'd
right.
literally walk to and from classes with books. Um, and then I played volleyball, right? So I ran track and field, I ran the
Mm,
400. I tried to be, super American. I did like, football, American football for like
right.
a season, and that didn't work out very well.
Mm,
I still got injuries from it.
mm.
Um, and I did volleyball, so that's kind of how I got by.
Interesting. I've always heard growing up in America, I've always thought the hardest transition is the middle school age. I thought middle school is the worst.
Mm. Middle
Um,
school, I didn't see much in middle school because I was always in school suspension. So
oh, really? Oh, you were like a
yeah,
bad kid.
I mean,
Right?
I don't know though. Like, was I? I don't know if I was bad. I did silly things, right?
Okay.
And I definitely tried to, uh, I tried to be cool, right? And I tried to hang out with people who I thought were cool, but the reality is they just got me in trouble all the time, right? Um, so that was kind of like that was my experience in middle school. I had just come out of private school because my
Yeah.
parents had put me in Christian private school for like
Hmm.
my entire life. Took
Hmm.
me out, put me into middle school, and I was just like, "What?" No. They still had me wearing uniform when
Right.
I went to a public, middle school, which was horrible for me as well. Right. My name's
Right.
Arthur.
Yep.
I'm wearing uniform. Like, come
Right.
on, fam. Like, that's where's
It's
DW?
yeah,
Like, shut
well,
up.
I was, it was so funny. You made that reference on your website about me, like the Arthur show, right? Before Mr. Ratburn was gay.
Yeah, right. I was
I
like,
mean,
yo,
they
how you
like
guys
messed
gonna
it
do that
all
to my
up.
show?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, man,
That
tripping.
was everyone's show. But I think it's, the thing about it is I really relate to your. I think a lot of kids. I don't know how it is today. I assume it's the same. Kids don't change. I mean, high
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
I feel like high school, middle school, that adolescent upbringing doesn't change. The issues might change. Like, I mean, the stuff
Mm,
they're dealing with today, I bet is crazy.
yeah,
With
true.
like all the gender pronouns and fluidity and things of that
Oh
sort,
yeah, oh
which
yeah,
was
oh yeah.
not a thing at all in the 90s, right? When I grew up. But yeah, it
Yeah,
was always like you were always trying you would try to balance. Looking back, I would always think about, man, if I could have done it over, I just would have been the kid in the front of the class, like just studying and just being in the books, right? But
yeah,
you like
yeah,
I got good grades in high school, but then I always wanted to sit in the back too with the bad kids
yeah,
because you wanted
yeah,
to also like participate, mainly because if you were that kind of was a safety zone for you, right? Because if the
mm,
bad kids were cool with you, that also was like a form of protection. I mean, I was
true,
a small kid in high school, right?
true. Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason as well, and I think that's something that immigrant parents don't realize. So I remember a friend of mine, we were in so in my freshman year of high school, right? We had a we're on quarters every 9 weeks. So my GPA was like 4.0, 4.0, 2.8, 4.0. And it
Mm,
was like I think the third semester it was I got a D in keyboarding. And it's not cuz keyboarding was hard. It was just like me and I had a friend, we were just goofing off all the time, right? And my teacher was like, she had me all here. So she's like, all of a sudden he just like something happened. So she called my dad up and was like trying to like, and basically said it was like me and my buddy just running shenanigans the entire like class, right?
oof,
and
oof. Uh-oh,
and he
uh-oh.
was just like, and my dad knew my friend. He was like, yeah, he's not a good influence and stuff like that. I'm like, yo, but like, so my friend was actually I don't know if you guys have had this in Orlando, but growing up we'd always have like these older uncles used to teach karate at the masjid. So
Mm,
so my friend's dad was one of these old school converts from the back in the day, a disciplinarian, and he used to teach karate at the masjid. And so as a result, my friend like knew how to fight from a young age, right?
so,
And
yeah.
so so that's why I always hung with him, because sometimes if you got like he was Muslim, but he also had like this streak about him that wasn't like, if you got on his bad side, he would like just body slam you or something, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
me and
yeah.
him, I always stayed cool with him. And so my dad didn't understand that. They're like, yo, I mean, because like immigrant parents are like, just hang around with all the nerds. I'm like, yo, I mean, and that's what they
It's not
want.
gonna work.
But yeah, because from a social, structure, so in a point of view, now it's something that I'm learning this as a parent myself, and it's hard. It's different because I have all girls, right?
Mm,
And I'm sure
mm,
girls'
mm.
circle social structures operate very differently. Also,
Yes,
my
yes.
daughters, my oldest is 8, and I'm just like she's in an all girls Islamic school, right? So that dynamic is going to be a certain way. So it's just
Yep.
something that I'm just trying to observe right now. I don't know what's going on, but I think it's just like
Yeah.
trying to Like I was just thinking about this today, right? Um, and this is going on a random tangent here. And I know you have kids, but I don't know how I remember they were fairly young as well. My
Yeah.
daughter, we're coming back from jujitsu class, right? And she's telling me about she's got his birthday party to go to on Sunday. And she was like, she missed it last, same classmate. She knows a birthday party, invites the whole class. And I was like thinking in my head, like, we've never thrown this kid like a legit birthday. He's 8 years, she's gonna be 9 in July. And we've never given
Yeah.
this kid like a legit birthday party with like her friends and stuff. It's just family only
Come on now.
kind of thing, right? And I was explaining it. I was like, hey, listen, Hadia, that's cool. You're going to his birthday party and stuff. Hope you have a good time. But you probably realize you've never gotten like a real birthday party, right? And she's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I've noticed that. It's like, well, because getting older isn't an accomplishment. That's what I told her. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody, like,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I was like, okay. And so I was like, I'm driving. I'm like, have you finished the Quran yet? She's like, I finished this juz and this juz. I'm like, nah, the whole Quran, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, you finish the whole Quran, maybe you get something. You get a belt promotion in jiu-jitsu, you get something, right? Getting older,
yeah.
Every Joe Schmo gets that. You know what I'm saying?
Right? True.
You know what I'm saying? So she's fine with it. It's not like we neglect her birthday, like, oh, we forgot. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just something small with the grandparents. We get some cake. What food do y'all want? That's it. But no big shebang. Because her friends they're throwing stuff at like bowling alleys and stuff. I'm like, nah, that like you can't, because then you get a precedence where you're doing that every year now.
You gotta do it every year. Yep.
Right. So I'm just like, no, it has to be something big for you to get something. So it's kind of been my now at her age. I'm sure some girls, they start competing on that kind of stuff. Like, oh, my birthday party was more lit than your birthday party. I mean, if I would assume, right, at some point in time, maybe at her age, I can
totally see it. You
know what I'm saying? And that's what they start comparing it on. And then I have to think about like, well, it's everything's a competition. Everyone's showing like, what do they got that someone else doesn't have? Now, maybe in Islamic school, could it be mitigated? Yeah, maybe, but kids are kids, human beings, right?
Of course. Yep.
So you're not going to really get that and stuff. So anyway, so you pass through high school. What you go into college? What point do you start getting? And you mentioned you grew up in a Christian family, right? So it seems to me like your faith was always an important part of your family life. Was that a safe assumption?
Faith, 100%. Faith was always a big thing. Religion specifically was a big thing because faith for us was just a part of religion, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist house. Which for most Jamaicans, that's kind of the default.
Is it? Okay.
Religion, yeah. My father was a pastor in that he was in and out of churches. He would always help, and occasionally he'd give sermons and things like that. My grandfather was a pastor. My great grandfather was a pastor. So I kind of grew up in this dynamic of just you're always in church. I wouldn't be able to do sports growing up because a lot of times sports activities would be on Saturdays, and we would go to church on Saturdays.
Right.
So it was always like, you're not like, that's just not something you're going to be able to do. Right. You can go to practices, and they would actually let me do this. They would actually let me go to practice all week.
Okay.
But then I'd skip games on Saturdays. So that was my reality, growing up. And
are they Trinitarians? Are Seventh-day Adventists? Are they Trinitarians?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was your question though. Sorry, what was it?
Yeah. So it was like you obviously faith was a part of it growing up, right? Seems like at what point, I guess, would you say that like how does Islam get your attention? Is the question.
So Islam gets my attention from a lot of different places, right? Okay. So I would say, so you have Lupe Fiasco, was a huge influence in some regards. I remember he came out with the song Muhammad Walks off of Yeezy's Jesus Walks. Mm-hmm. And then there was Nicholas Anelka. Nicholas Anelka was a famous footballer out of Chelsea FC in the UK.
Are you a Chelsea fan?
Yeah. I'm a huge Chelsea fan. And I'm even more of a Chelsea fan that Roman Abramovich is gone. Massive Chelsea fan here.
There's quite a few, like, I don't know if you know brother Ijaz Ahmed, the apologetics guy from the
Okay.
from Trinidad. Big Chelsea
Yeah.
fan. Yeah,
Chelsea fan as well, mashallah.
So how do you is that just a team? Because were you just watching Premier League soccer when they were coming up in oh
So
five, oh
yeah, yeah.
four?
So yeah, exactly, right. So I'm seeing that, I'm seeing like these type of people. I'm seeing Anelka. I'm hearing whisperings of him being Muslim, and I'm like,
Right.
word, him, like
Yeah.
black guy, like super handsome, like
Mhm.
what is this? Lupe. And then I have things as well. So my own father, he studied in Haifa, in Palestine,
Mm.
way back when journalism, and so he came back with like lots of books and things like that home. And so I kind of had these things in the home. I was a huge historical fantasy reader, like my favorite. And I chanced upon a lot of books that would talk about the Moors and,
Right.
and these things. And so I would find myself just kind of consuming lots and lots of information on Muslims from just different places. And then, of course, you have a lot of influence in music, right? More than just Lupe, right? You had lots and lots of influence. So I kind of went on this, soul searching when I was going to go into seminary, and I decided I had just got ordained as a junior deacon. Then I got ordained as a deacon, and then I was doing like VBS, which some people might know as Vacation Bible School. So I would teach there, and during the summers, and I just was really starting to really get into Christianity, but there was this, some wasn't sitting right, so many things weren't sitting right. And so I didn't just go from like Christianity to Islam. In fact, I sat with, I read the Gita, sat with a rabbi at the time. I had a friend who had meditated for over like 10, 20 years out in Nepal. He was a monk. And so we would sit and we talk. He'd teach me how to meditate while I walked, all that jazz.
Mhm.
And, I had these circles that I would go and kind of just pull information from. But again, none of it was really sitting right with me until someone told me, hey, you can actually learn Arabic at this one class. And I was like, all right, I'll check it out. Because I didn't really want to accept anything without knowing the text and the text. Because I had this concept of like people just trying to pull one over on you, right? They tell you this is what it's really about, but then the text says something completely different, right?
Did you study
And
Greek though? Did you study the New
I,
Testament in Greek ever?
I didn't, I no, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't get to. No, no.
So,
What do
but
you mention that?
I'm curious because if you're saying you're exploring and then you're gonna go learn Arabic, I would assume just that you would have like studied Hebrew. You would have maybe like studied some Hebrew to look at the Old Testament or some Greek to read the New Testament. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I did, so we had texts that we would use in seminary that didn't necessarily teach you the language per se, right?
Okay.
But they were just translations, if you will, right?
Okay.
And so I would use, that's what I utilized to access the early literature and the early New Testament and whatnot. So that's what I
Mhm.
would use at the
Okay.
time. And in essence, what I wanted to do was utilize, for example, whatever text I was going to be reading and learn a little bit of the language, which was kind of a little bit, it was a lot to be asking myself at that
Yep.
point in time. But anyhow, eventually I came to this class on the Arabic language, and I was going to learn the Quran and whatnot. Or sorry, learn the Arabic language in like 10, 15 days or something like that. And it ended up being like a Tajweed course.
Okay.
Right. And I'm sitting in the Tajweed course and I'm hearing the Quran. I'm just like, what is this thing? Like, this is something out of this world, literally.
Mm.
Right. And so that's kind of where the story started. That's where the story started.
There's a lot of people. I think I've heard. How many people have I heard to say that they've heard the Quran, they didn't know what it was, but something about it is capped. It was like not from this world, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So,
100%.
yeah. So, I mean, not to get into the whole like drawn out process, but eventually you obviously become Muslim. Um, you know, Coming from a family where you have your father's a pastor. Um, any kind of pushback, I assume, or at any point in time, or
Yeah.
was it all kind of smooth sailing?
Yeah. There was a lot of pushback. So my mother, for the first like 2.5 years, she cried every day. Right. So whenever she saw me, she cried. Right? Literally, she'd just break down and crying. And that was really hard. That was hard. My father kind of had like this uh, pulled back, stoic, kind of reflective state that he was in for like the first 2, 3 years. He'd see me, look away, go back to watching CNN and Osama bin Laden, and like whatever else is going on at the time, right? We didn't really have too much conversation during those days, my father and I. Um, he kind of had this statement where he'd say like, I raised you and I taught you everything that you know, and so any decision that you make is a reflection of me and how I taught you. So he never really came at me like, this is a stupid decision, you can't do this, you can't do that, etc., etc. I think when I look back at it, that he was more reflective of what did I do and how did I teach him and what did I teach him that led him to come to get to this place.
Mhm.
And I think that was more of my father's approach. But my mother, yeah, she was a hot mess. She was a hot mess. Yeah.
It is. I don't know. Do you does it ever cross your mind? Because I mean, I was just reflecting upon like some of the kids I grew up with, right? My brother's 10 years younger than me, some of his friends, and some of the stuff they're into now. Like, um, I don't ask if they're still Muslim, but some cats are like changing their genders and stuff, right? That
Yeah,
I know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, what do you think about like it crosses my mind a lot, like what my kids are gonna be upon, right?
yep,
Um,
yep,
so I
yep,
obviously I empathize with your parent, like with any parents, like parents of any convert in some sense, because they don't understand. A lot of times, if they're not religious, though, they're just like, all right, it's cool, whatever. But when you're a Christian, I would have to assume, like you're a Muslim,
oh yeah,
that my child now is paving his path to the hellfire,
yep,
right?
yeah, 100%,
Essentially,
hundred
you know what I
percent,
mean?
100%,
Um,
100%.
and I was like, does that ever cross your like? Does when you're dealing with people in your community, people the brothers you deal with, is this something that people are thinking about? Like, obviously, my kid's only 8, right? I don't think they're exposed
Yeah,
to anything
yeah,
else, but it's just a matter of time. They will be, right?
yeah,
And
100%. Yeah.
um, I remember I was having a conversation with I don't know if you know Ustad Jesse McKinsey.
I
Um,
don't know.
he's from
No. I
Memphis.
know that the name sounds familiar, actually.
He was an old little Maghreb instructor for like a short time. Lives in Dallas now, but originally from
Uh,
Memphis. So he's got like 10 kids or something, right? So I remember
mashallah.
talking to him about this like 10 years ago, and this is when like the word this is before like where maybe if your kid came out same sex attracted and something came out, right? And so you'd hear brothers say, well, if you just raise the kid right, that protects their parents that have raised something right. And in my head, I'm like, nah, like you're not in
Yeah,
control. Like at the end of the day, like I think that you're just not in control. And
yeah.
we hear, especially in light of what happened recently with the passing of Shireen Abu Akla in Philistine,
Mm-hmm,
people
mm-hmm.
coming out about this whole idea of making dua for the deceased non-believers and their whatever that means, but like you know how does now you have your own child that is upon something that you raise them with and they flip and you believe, and the people who listen to the show, I would sing for the most part, are going to be in this position that Islam is the most important thing in your life. There's nothing more important. So now your child leaves, what do you do?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I
It's
mean,
almost
like,
like what?
no, no, I was just gonna say, like, I know for my mother and father, there was definitely somewhat of a crap, like, what has my son done, right? But I think their fear was more, is he gonna go join some group more than anything else, right? And I think this might just be a reality of Jamaica and Jamaica's culture. But we have this very open culture when it comes to religion and groups, right? And this might be very heavily due to the Rastafarian
Okay.
component there, but this understanding of almost almost perennialist, to be honest, right?
Mm,
So I mean, granted, in the very beginning, they didn't have that mindset. In the very beginning, it was like, oh my God, it's going to hell, right? Because they had like, I had like pastors from different congregations coming and visiting the house every weekend and sitting with me and, trying to, pull me back in, if you will, which
mhm.
was very hard. But I think in the very beginning, that was their fear, like hellfire, brimstone, all that jazz. But
Yep.
then it kind of became like, okay, he's just going to go join a group. And that's really scary for us, right? But once they saw that the behavior was on point and, I was still caring for them and in fact had become even better at all of that, then, they became to open up. But like to talk a little bit about what you're saying about like the children, like there's a few things that come to mind. One, I was just reading, just quick, I work for Mecca Books and the CMO at Mecca Books, and we have this new book coming out called The Exemplars of Our Times, which is a book uh, co-authored by Peter Sanders and Sidi Haroon Sujit. And so the two of them, you might be familiar with Meanings of Mountains.
Correct. Yeah.
As a book that Peter Sanders. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so they really delved into some of these figures and wrote full-on biographies. So you have like Sheikh Hamdi Yusuf coming in with like a biography of Murabat al-Hajj, for example, like a full-on beautiful tribute to him.
So it's more like the Meetings with Mountains is like a photography book, right? It's more like a coffee table book where it's like images where he went on and there's like little snippets, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then this book is more, so if you take like Sayyidi Muhammad ibn al-Habib, it wouldn't just be like a quick reflection about this picture that they took. It would be like a full... Okay, I got you. All right.
It's huge. It's huge, right? So I've been, spending a lot of time with it. One of the stories that really has been hitting me is Fatima Yashruti, right? Her father, Sayyid Ali Nuruddin Yashruti, very big figure in the Darqawi tradition. And there's just story after story because she pretty much she was very special in the sense that she journaled a lot of her life, right? And which I think is so powerful, by the way, of people writing. And I'm doing that myself, not because I think I'm special, but because I think it's important for people to be able to see the transition that a person makes as a convert, coming from Christianity or whatever faith or not faith that they have into Islam, and the struggles that they kind of go through. And I think it's important to document it so people can understand it. And specifically for my children to understand, going back to your question as well, as to how do we protect our children and whatnot, like I need my children to realize that Baba didn't just come to this deen and just like, it was all willy-nilly and happy, right? Like this has not been pretty in any way, shape or form, right? So that's one thing that I've done. But I'm reading this, I was reading her portion of the story, and it's like talking about how she's like 5 and she's praying like Fajr, she's praying Subh, right, in the mornings, and like she's praying Isha and she's sitting in halaqat with her father and with others and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, how in the world do you get children like at this point, and how like, for example, she'd share like almost all of her gifts. I was like, yo, if I tell my daughter Eleanor to share a gift that she just got with someone, like there's gonna be a fight, fam. Like it's not going to end pretty, right? So I'm just like reading to it. I'm just like, how do we inculcate all of these manners in our children? And they mentioned the ayah وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارُ فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Right, that just in the portion in Surah Al-Kahf, mentioning how that the wall where the treasure was, and that the father had been righteous. And you find so many different like tafsir out there on the ayah, but there's this concept of like righteousness is a means of protection for children, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like really preserves children by way of that righteousness that parents had. And that for me is something that I really hold on to as well. Like, okay, Ya Rab, like I'm trying, like, see, help me out here. Like I'm trying to do what I can, and inshallah, you're the one who ultimately at the end of the day, pulls the strings. So that's one thing. The other thing, I just saw an article on The Atlantic, by the way, which gives this, it's a data scientist, and he writes about the argument between nature versus nurture, and highlights how data is really showing a lot nowadays that where a child is raised has a lot and more so to do with even what a parent does, right? And I found that to be so important. And it's one of and we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but this is one of the biggest things as well when it came for me, saying I'm out, right? And why we're talking, and I'm in the Emirates and whatnot.
Yeah. No, so there's a now Sayyidah Fatima, I assume she's from the Maghrib. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from like Fez or what city do you know?
I don't remember the exact city actually,
Okay.
because technically she ends up growing up in Palestine.
Okay. And
in
what
Shem,
era
yeah.
was she? What era is this era?
1800s.
1800s. Okay.
1800s, yeah, late 1800s leading up into, so she was alive up until so early 1900s, because she was
Eh,
alive up until 1930s,
Right.
1920s.
Um, we have the parking lot this item because this is something that I really when I went to Morocco, it
Mm-hmm.
really made a lot of sense to me. I mean, hell, we'll just talk about it right now. Okay, so we went when we went to because I've got this I am there is so it's hard for me to explain to people this, right? So I guess how I'll frame it. So I have a friend named Sidi Umer Hasib. I don't know if you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with him or not. He is a right now he's the I guess it's kind of scholar in residence for Tat Leaf Collective, but he's
Mashallah. Okay.
29.
Okay.
Okay,
Mashallah.
so and this always sometimes when you need to see human transformation before your eyes to for things that make sense sometimes, right?
Allah.
You know what I mean? Um, I was remembering because I was thinking about this because the first time I met this kid, I say kid because I'm 40, right? He's 29. This is like
Yeah.
2009 ISNA in Chicago, and I think I'm driving. We're pulling up to Giordano's for dinner with
Yeah.
Sheikh Yasser Qadi, right? And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
some youth came along, so I was involved in the Maghrib Institute back then. So I've known Sheikh Yasser for now since 2005, right?
Mashallah.
So because I was very active with Al Maghrib Institute back in the day, and so whenever he never come to Chicago, we'd always make sure we took him out. And so one of the volunteers, you may know him, Sakib Shafi, the Creekstone guy, right?
Yeah.
Food blogger. So he comes, and so this kid comes with us to this table, and there's a bunch of kids, and we're like, we don't know why you are here, you know. We got real questions to ask the Sheikh, and we can't have y'all anyways. He just oh, I'm Sakib's cousin. This kid, I just remember that's him saying that, right? And I remember this kid was cared about protein shakes and basketball and this and that, right? So he's 16. And then I would see him come around and volunteer at events, and he was being mentored by one of my buddies. And then I saw him disappear for a while. And I was just I asked my friend, my friend Mike. I'm like, hey Mike, where's Omer? He's like, oh, little Omer, man, he's in Morocco. It's like, what's he doing there? I was like, oh, he went to go study or something. I was like, oh man, he's good. I was like, oh, he's probably well, it's another fad. People are going for 3 months and gonna come back and fail, and the kid goes through the entire program at the Caroine, right? And he comes back and just being around him now because I remember the 16-year-old version and now I see the 29-year-old version, and I'm hitting them up. I'm like, hey man, what's the ruling on this, or what's that? I got a question about this, right? And I'm just like, this is it's kind of blows your mind. But when I went to Fez and then I met some of his teachers like Molay Hashim Rahimullah, I was just this is the secret right here.
Yep.
Because this kid was in this environment for 8 years, and of people of just, and there's something very special about Fez that I didn't see anywhere else, to be honest. It was just the people there, everyone was you meet somebody oh, you have to come to my house for tea. I don't even know you. Or I remember my my tour guide, who was his friend, I found out later was one of the Fez singers, one of the young Fez singers. Right? So I remember one distinct moment he would be and Omer would tell me they call Fez the City of the Saints, right? There was an old documentary by Sidi Fuad, that he made 10 years ago, right? Rahimullah. So and I was it's for real, because I remember you go to my tour guide. I let him drive my car because I didn't want to drive in Fez. So we're driving around the outskirts and we're in a parking lot, right? And he's he just stopped. He's like, oh, there's from the Awliya right there. It was somebody who's blind, right? And I forget his name, but he went there and he's and he was just talking on the side of the street, and he was just and some people will think this is just so goofy. How do you guys know they're Awliya and all this kind of stuff? But I'm I think you are missing the point. Technicality, right? These are people. There's something about etiquette and adab and just what they call about light, people who are carrying light. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's hard to explain. So I just tell people like you got to go to Fez,
Yeah.
but if you go to Fez and you got like you're like if you got a certain like cap on where you're like not going to like and you're gonna think everything is like innovation or shirk. I mean, you might
You
not. It might not work out for you in a
ain't
sense
gonna get it.
because
Definitely not.
no, because it's funny because I went with a friend of It just so happened when we got there, we had some friends that we went from from our Hajj buddies. They happened to be there, so we linked up. But he's not on that orientation. So I remember we were like, hey, we're gonna go visit the Sheikh Molay Hashim's house, right?
Yeah.
So I remember Wednesday night we got there, and then Omer calls me. I'm in Fez. He's like, hey, are you gonna go visit Molay Hashim? And at the time, I was just like, yeah, I guess. Where's he at? And I didn't really know who he was, to be honest. Right?
Yeah.
I had the
Yeah.
books. I had the like the Michael Sugich's books and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
remember I was like, well, sure. I mean, yeah, if you're requesting me to go visit him, I'll go visit him, and
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
long as he's available, sure. Because I'm like, okay, no problem. And I remember
Yeah.
my tour guide starts dialing his number, and the picture when the phone number dials, like on WhatsApp, the picture
Yeah.
from Peter Sanders' famous picture that everyone knows pops up on the phone. And I'm like, we're gonna go see him.
Mm.
That's what I recognize. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so, we went to his house, and it was just like
Also,
my friends were like, "Oh, well, yeah, we're just gonna hit up the tanneries or something, right?" You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's all good, but like,
yeah. Yeah.
you're like not gonna. It's the whole thing about like having the vessel open. So, long story short is, I was like, everyone like these people. There's something special about this place that like the kids need to get exposed to, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
even met
Yeah.
like female mashayikh, like in
Of
their
course. Of
80s,
course.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, who had memorized so many of these texts,
Yep.
and I was there for 3 days, but I'm like, and I told people when I left Fez, it felt like you're leaving Medina. You know that feeling when you leave. You know
Allah.
what I mean?
Allah.
It is so I was like, there's something very special about this place that it's hard to explain. You got to go there, but I guess you also have to see. You have to be, I guess, looking for the right things. And when I went back to Chicago, and Umair and I were, he was telling me, he's like, hey man, listen, you don't know this. I'm not telling you this now. Like 4 months ago, because I was telling him I was in a spiritual rut. And then he said he made a dua that I was gonna go be able to meet some of his mashayikh and whatnot and like kind of
MashaAllah.
connect, right? So it happened, alhamdulillah. So now I say like, okay, I got my girls, and this is something that I think we can it's an environment to expose them to. I don't know if it's a long term
100%.
fix at all, but when you're talking about Hijrah now you're in Abu Dhabi. Is it like making Hijrah to Abu Dhabi like making Hijrah to Vegas?
Nah, fam. Nah,
No,
fam. Nah, fam.
that's
Nah,
what people would think like Abu Dhabi. So tell me about like Abu Dhabi then, I guess.
it's so interesting, right? Because I'm coming from Cairo, obviously having, lived there, studied, and then went to the States during the COVID, the little
Mhm.
initial, stretch of COVID. And then I was like, no, I can't kick it here anymore. Like America's not going to do it for me, And so I was looking for the next place. Like, where am I going to go? Am I going to go back to Cairo? I looked into Maghreb, I looked into West Africa, Malaysia, I looked into as well, Turkey, of course.
Mhm.
And I kind of needed a place where I could move forward in a career of my choice, right? So
Okay.
I'm into tech, and so I was
Okay.
like, okay, I need a place where I can have a decent internet. That's
Right.
one,
Right.
right?
Because internet in Fez
Help,
kind of sucks.
yeah, it doesn't work. I
I
tried.
think it's the mountains or something. I don't know what it is, but
It might be. But yeah, so I was like, okay, I need internet. I need a place where I can have some of the amenities that I'm accustomed to. All right. So, I did grow up in the area that I grew up in. And so kind of wanted some of those amenities. And at the same time, I want the masajid. I want the community. I want, some of these things. And even less so the community I was concerned with, to be honest, but more so the culture. Where Islam is within the culture itself and not necessarily something that needed to be taught, right? And of course, you still have to teach. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like fiqh,
right.
for example, which is what I specialize in, has to be taught. But there's some things that are kind of embedded in culture that you don't have to say anything anymore.
Right.
And so I found that a lot of my teachers in the past used to live in Abu Dhabi. A lot of them in the past, right? I won't drop any names, but a lot
Sure.
of them used to live out here, and some of them are still here. And I was like, okay, I need to check that place out, right? I know Dubai and Abu Dhabi people talk about it. In fact, when I called somebody up, they were like, "Oh yeah, Dubai is cash and Abu Dhabi's class." I was like, "I'm moving to Abu Dhabi then. We bought that life, right?"
Okay.
So you know, I said, "All right, let me check out Abu Dhabi." But honestly, you're right. A lot of people have this concept because they watch, you know, Fast and Furious, or they're seeing things on television and whatnot. And yeah, there's definitely a side of Abu Dhabi and Dubai that is glamorous and
Mm,
glitz and partying,
right.
and more so Dubai more than anything. Abu Dhabi now is where the traditional Arab are still at, right? There's some places out here like Al Ain, for example, where
Mm,
it's still like old school, right? Now the
mm,
difficult thing is, and the thing where I think a lot of people end up having issues is that the expat community is so removed from the traditional Emirati Arab community that like they don't even see each other, right?
okay.
And when an expat does see a local, it's kind of just like, oh, a local, right? But they have no idea like their lived realities. Like they're not invited to their homes, they're not chilling with them, they're not growing up, they sometimes don't even go to the same schools, you know. Um, Emiratis, for example, most oftentimes they don't leave their homes because I mean, their homes are quite large, a lot of them, right? They have
Mm,
like, if they want to go to the park, they just go outside, you know?
right.
So it's like, so there's just a lot of things that they're far removed. But I moved out here, and for me, because I had connections, well, so one of my main teachers, Sheikh Zuhair, shout out to Marcus Imam Malik, I teach out there. And we have a lot of good work that we're doing in spreading the madhab of Imam Malik. But Sheikh Zuhair, he was brought from Jazair, from a place called Adrar, to Dubai, all right, by one of the Habaib. And he started teaching here for a good number of years, started
Uh-huh.
working with the Dawla Al-Qaf. And he connected me and, told me, hey, there's some people that you can connect with. When I came out here, I was in a molded the week after,
Right. Okay.
right? Like, I mean, it's like that, right? I mean, there are shuyukh out here,
Mm,
right? Saudi is about a 6-7 hour drive from here, right?
okay.
There's a place called Ahsa. There's
Mm-hmm.
an organization called Faqhi Nafsak,
Mm-hmm.
which is run by the Sheikh Naif al Mubarak, so
Okay.
a big key player in the Maliki Madhab. Six,
Mm-hmm.
7 hour drive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they call that place the Azhar of the Khalij,
Right.
right? So there's ilm out here. Like there's
Mm.
ilm out here. It's just you got to know who you got to know.
I got you. I got you. Because I think we have a perception that, like, now I don't know, because Dubai and Abu Dhabi would have the same kind of government regulations for the most part, right? As far as because I think there's perception that you can't, um, like there's no programming, for to speak. Maybe there's no programming in the sense that like a Maghrib weekend seminar or things of that sort or big
Nah,
conferences and
they
stuff
don't
like
got that.
not that kind of
Nah, they
thing,
don't got that
right?
out here. They
You know
don't
what I'm
got that
saying?
out here.
But
Yeah.
like I remember I never asked him this, but my a friend of mine, he went to Dubai. I've been to Dubai and I've been to Abu Dhabi. It's like
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi was like a 1 day layover, just kicked it there on a layover to go to
Yeah.
Bangladesh in 2010. And Dubai, we spent a week there in 2013, right? I think
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
wife was
Yeah.
just like, I just want to go to a place where I don't got to worry about the food and just relax, right? That
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember my buddy one time he shows me a picture. He comes back from to Chicago and he's like, "Hey, look who I saw at the Burj Khalifa." And it's him and Mohammed Al-Sharif from Al Maghrib. I guess he lives there in Dubai.
Ah.
Or well, I don't know if he's
It,
still there now, but maybe he's between there and Ottawa, but he was living in Dubai for some time,
ah.
right?
Interesting.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is a thing. So um do you think that Dubai has this? Because for example, a lot of the okay, so we talk about Hijrah, right? I
Mm-hmm.
work in corporate America, Fortune 500
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
global. I know they have stuff in Dubai, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if they have stuff
Yeah.
in Abu Dhabi. But like if people make the move, and a lot of them, I've talked to brothers who are like who are religiously inclined, but they've like talked about going to Dubai,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get relocated there. And I've always kind of
Yeah.
been kind of wonder. And there's this whole thing about too, like do they want to from the ethics of like the whole
Politics.
politics, right? To
Yeah.
keep it
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
speaking, everyone knows what we mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And where your money's going. Um, do you think people can get the same benefit in Dubai? Is it still there if they look for it, or is this special to Abu Dhabi?
Nah, I mean, Dubai actually is more open, right? So if your person goes to Dubai, I could tell them like very openly, there's like mahdaras. So the mahdara system is like what you would find in Mauritania,
Okay,
where you'd go and you'd find like a
right.
sheikh and you'd have like the tent, the khiyam, and like you'd go and you'd
Mm,
study. Like they still have those, like some systems of that running in Dubai right now, right?
mm,
I have friends that have studied at Azhar, that have studied Mauritania, and they actively study and teach with some Mauritanian shuyukh that are out there.
mm,
Because Mauritanians are out here in plethora, right? Like the Rais of the president of the Iftah of the UAE is Abdul bin Bayah, right?
right,
He's not even Emirati,
right,
right? He's Mauritanian, right?
right.
So he, you know, back in the day, like they brought in Sheikh Zayed Allah yarhamu, he brought in a lot of people from Mauritania and from Yemen, the Habaib, right?
Mm,
So all of them got visas, all of them got residency, all of them live here. So if you can imagine, I mean, these are the type of people that are here. They're here, right? They're
yeah,
here and they're going to teach.
right.
It's not like something they can stop themselves from doing. So Dubai, like you can definitely find places to sit and to learn and whatnot. I think the thing though with Hijrah, with a lot of people, is that when they think of Hijrah, they're thinking of Hijrah in the sense of I'm going somewhere to go learn the deen, right?
Yeah.
I ain't concerned with learning the deen. I'm concerned with living it, right? Like I'm
Explain a little bit. Let's unpack that.
the most simplest of things,
Okay.
right? I'm a little. I don't think I'm strict, right? But people will be like, "Oh, you need to chill," you know. But I, Imam Akhdari talks about sarawil. Salah is sarawil, right? You know, the prayer when you're wearing pants, right? And he says either it's makruh or it's haram, right? That's it,
Okay.
right?
Mm.
That's it, right? Yo, you go pray here. I promise you, like if you see someone in pants, you will literally see him going and looking for a plastic bag at the very least to wrap around himself.
Or like an izar. Or like people carry an izar with him or something.
Yeah, if he has an izar with him, then yeah, of course, meshi, yallah, right? But you'll just find a guy like really quickly just trying to like find something to like put around. Like it's really small. It's a really
Interesting.
small detail. I know it's really small, but it's a big deal, right?
This is something
Like
that I think our Salafi brothers, a lot of things they got right. If you think now you mention
yeah,
it, I remember because I
yeah.
came in through the Dawah Salafiyah, and there would be a thing where brothers would
We
always
all
be
did,
like,
fam.
"Make sure you got an izar
Yeah,
with you, right?"
yeah. Oh
You
yeah,
know what I'm
and
saying?
they're out here too. They're out here. So like you know, I mean, I don't want to name names of places, but
Right.
you know, they find places you know to settle down, and many
Right.
of them have been here since the '90s.
Right.
Actually,
Hmm.
they made their hijrah real early,
Right.
and they've been here for quite some time. And so you know, there's just small things like that. My daughter, for example, she's really into horses. She loves horses. She wants to ride. You know, this is a big thing for her. And one of the first places that I found for horse riding, I called. I was like, "Hey, can I come and check it out?" They're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, you can't." And I was like, "Why?" They're like, "Well, your daughter can come. It's women's only." And I was like, "Okay, so what time can I come though?" Like, they're like, "No, like you can't come at all." I was like, "Okay, what about her instructor? Like, she probably like no, even the instructors are women." I'm like, huh? Like, what are you talking? Like the whole place, like it's a huge equestrian, and it's just made for women.
So you
You
like
know, so
drop her
just
off at the
things like
front
that.
kind of thing. You
I
kind
just
of
drop
drop.
her at the front. They got a little golf cart thingy. They take her in, and they, you know, she does her thing. I go out to go eat with family, and any restaurant for the most part, right? My wife wears niqab, right? Any restaurant for the most part is just like, oh, they realize they send a female waitress, right? And they'll get one of those little putadas, and, you know, put it up, right? So she can just chill if it's a packed place,
Right.
and it's just default. And this is Cheesecake Factory, fam.
Mm.
Um,
So this I got so much to ask. um
ask.
no, because like we right, so my daughter, she's 8, right? And I'm like,
Yeah,
and I was scrolling through. I'm like, man, how did this kid grow up so quick? First of all, I have three girls, mashallah.
mashallah,
Alhamdulillah. So I
mashallah,
like
mashallah.
my youngest is 3, 8, 4, and 3,
Okay.
right? My 8-year-old, I'm
Allah bless them.
like,
Allah
looking at her
bless them.
pictures, I'm like, when she's a baby, I'm like, it's like yesterday I blinked and she's 8. And she's gonna be 9 in July. I'm
Allah.
like, puberty's coming soon. Like, crap. I'm like, you know, um, but like, I think about like jujitsu. Like, one of the reasons, because we were thinking about like, martial arts, sports.
Mm-hmm,
They're really
mm-hmm.
limited in the sports they can do,
Yeah, yeah,
right? As far as
yeah,
attire, the jujitsu,
yeah,
it's like, okay, you wearing a gi, right?
yeah.
And then I gotta find like I remember when I went to an academy here, it's just like I told the instructor, professor, like, hey, listen, I'm only gonna roll with men, and she's gonna only roll with girls, right? He's like, yeah, they have it as a daily setup, but
Yeah.
I'm like, there's still gonna be, there's still things like that. I think people have to think about because you don't. I guess when you're raising girls, I guess the concern is
Yeah.
you don't want their growth to be stunted because things just can't be accommodated for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what
And
it sounds
and
like.
you know the thing is, Megan, like so many women in the States feel that way and feel underrepresented, feel that they can't, break through certain barriers, feel like they're being, yani zulm. There's like a feeling of oppression against
Mhm.
them, and it inhibits them and it hurts them in terms of their faith, right?
Mm.
Whereas I'll tell you, like the first time we got here, my wife was just like, "Yo, fam, I feel so free. Like I feel like I can do whatever I want within the confines of our faith,
And she wore
right?"
niqab back in America too,
And nah,
right?
she didn't wear
Oh, she
niqab in
did.
America.
Okay,
She
so
was
it's
she was
kind of
nah,
oh,
nah. She even told me that was one of her prerequisites as well. She's like, "I'm not wearing niqab unless I'm in Cairo or unless I'm in, we're
uh,
moving to Emirates, for example."
mm,
Right? Like the States, because unfortunately, and this is real, and this is me talking just very real, like a
yeah,
lot of women feel this fear almost,
mm,
right? Of like, I'm going out in the club or even hijab, even people are just like, nah. Like how many community members I know that have reached out and it's like, I have anxiety just going
mm,
grocery shopping sometimes. Whenever a shooting happens, they're triggered again,
right,
you know? Um, so, and we can get into discussions of fear only Allah and things like that and blah blah blah. But we got to be real at the same time as well. And you're not going to have that fear. Look, I leave my keys in the car, and I'll tell you because no one's going to steal my car. I already know it. And if someone
mm,
does, they're not going to be in the country very long, right?
mm,
Um, but like there's this air of just comfortability of just you being a woman and being able to do things. So when you mention rolling with men and rolling with women, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even have to utter those words here. I
right,
don't even have to say that. It's just
mm,
understood that if I'm a man and that's a woman, that she's gonna be rolling with someone else, right?
yeah,
And I'm gonna be rolling with someone who looks like me, right? That it's just understood. Like even when I take my daughter to tennis lessons, because right now, tennis is something that she does because she loves watching Baba play tennis, right? So she wants to
okay,
be able to learn enough to be able to play with me, and I'm cool with that right now. She's young, and inshallah she'll transfer over into something. Archery is actually what we're thinking about
mm-hmm.
for her for the long term. But like literally, the tennis court is there. There's a musalla right next to it, and then
Mm-hmm.
goes off. I'm like, I'll be right back. I go pray. I come right back to go watch it. Like it's just for me, this is
Yeah,
life, and this is what I mean by living it, right? Um, I know a lot of people want to learn, because and it's important to. It's fard, right?
right,
Like there are something that are of the farad that you have to learn, and I believe that nowadays you can learn that no matter what, right?
mm,
Unless you're lazy, right?
right,
You can learn that in the States. That's not an issue, right? There's the asrar that you mentioned when you talk about Maghreb, right, Morocco, and there are some asrar that you can only experience, right?
mm,
And sure, you can probably find people like that in the States, and you can find some of them here in Emirates. You can find some of them, in Maghreb. You can find them in Qahira. You can find them in different places.
mm-hmm.
But for me, at this point in my life, it's about يعني حفظ على الأولاد, right? Protection of my children
Mm,
and keeping them in an environment in a place where they're one super proud to say I'm Muslim,
right,
right? Where everyone else around them is Muslim, right? Where their Islam isn't something that they have to carry on their back, right? Because we're all proud about that. We're all proud about, like, in America, it's like, oh, it's so important to wear your hijab and to be proud of it because you need to
unapologetically
show
Muslim.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, on yo, fam, that's a burden. That's a heavy burden to carry every single day you go out, and some
mm.
people don't want to carry that, right? And so that's why I'm saying just living as a Muslim, khalas,
What
that's it.
about you hear about because people just say that the Muslim countries are just a few years behind America as far as like stuff just going down the drain as far as fahisha and things like that, or someplace say it's worse, and I think they point to examples of like Aramco kids who grew up in like compounds and like that kind of thing, right? Um, like is like what's the level of religiosity there that you're seeing amongst you know your the people in Abu Dhabi?
So I think a lot of people try to make excuses for themselves to feel better.
Okay.
That's me being real,
Okay.
right? And I say that to say one thing. I look at so many people that I was surrounded with growing up, and when I became Muslim in the Muslim community now, um, and many of them are going through life crises in their Islam. Many of them have they ain't practicing no more. Families, and we're not even talking third generation. We're talking sometimes second generation, right?
Right.
Um, Whereas one, and I'm just going to the very basic level, right? There are people, and I'm sure you know this, there are people that you could go to, right? A lot of them, not some, a lot of them, and talk to them and like, yo, you Muslim? And like, they're like, yeah, you know, yeah, like, I kind of am, right? And there's some you might even tell you like, you know, they might tell you not really, like, you know, that's something my parents were into, like whatever. But you know, I grew out of that, like
Right.
whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fam, you're not going to find that in many of these countries, right? Yeah, you're going to find some atheists and like some holes every once in a while, right?
Right.
But
Right.
the
Right.
average child that you talk to, the average teenager that you talk to, is going to punch you in the face if you tell
Mm.
them you're a Catholic. They're a Catholic, right? They will punch you in the face. They'll punch you in the throat. Like, who are
Right.
you talking to, right?
Right.
I am a Muslim. My mother's a Muslim. My father's a Muslim. I will die as a Muslim, right? And for me, if I just have my children die as Muslims, I'm good because I didn't have this, right? I didn't
Right.
have this, right? I'm not, again, like for me, I'm not reaching for the stars, like, oh, I need my daughter to be an alima and she needs to memorize this and memorize that. And she's working on these things. She's doing Latun and whatnot. But
Right.
if she can just grow up and die and get married, have children, raise them as Muslims, and die as a Muslimah, right? And
Yeah.
those children, my grandchildren, I come to them and they come over and I'm all old and I got my little cane and I'm like, Salaam alaikum ya shabab, right?
Yeah.
And they come over and they're like, you know, كيف الحال يا جدي, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, everything بخير, you know, I'm talking to them, you know? Right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, من ربك? Huh? من ربك?
Yeah.
And they're like, Allah, right?
Right.
I'm good. I'm good.
There's it's fun. It's really ajib, amazing you mentioned that because I get added like the most random WhatsApp groups. So there's something I saw in a WhatsApp group actually today.
Mm.
Um, and I think this brother who said this, who made this quote, I'm not gonna mention his name, but I think a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
cats think about this. So this is what he says. Cool. I'm gonna read his exact statement.
Mashallah.
The first statement says that there are rational evidences that establish my religious belief from another Muslim, a more practicing brother. This brother replies, quote, there is absolutely no rational evidence that establishes my belief in Islam. Only that my mother told me I was Muslim when I was a kid, and that my family and ancestors were Muslim. I haven't found anything remotely resembling evidence to justify asking my non-Muslim friends to convert to Islam. I told my kids religion is not really my thing, but we are Muslim and I'll be damned if one of them converts off of it on my watch. Now, this dude's like probably mid 40s, I would say. Corporate guy, corporate Desi suburban dude, right? Um, like you're not really like you're just kind of hoping without really doing anything that your kids stay Muslim or your progeny stays Muslim, right? At some point, that mindset it ain't gonna work. It's just gonna like flake off, right? He has some kind of it's like the ghira for this is how I was raised, more or so, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mentioned that not because he's unique, but I think that's very not unique. I think that's like a very normal thing
But
to
where?
have.
So here's a question though: where was he born?
I
In the
think
States?
yeah, states. Yep,
He was born in the States
yep,
in a very Desi household, probably.
probably, yep,
Yeah, yeah. Because people
yeah,
like that, like they usually come from homes where like the culture was just like really really strong, right?
mm,
But I'd say to him, so there's أول من يجب أول واجب على المكلف ممكنا من نظر أن يعرف الله ورسله بالصفات مما عليه نصب الآيات in text Ibn Ashir, right?
mm.
So it mentions that the first thing that is the first duty for the one who's mukallaf, one who's legally responsible, is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the messengers, right, with their attributes, right, and to understand it by way of uh, the in essence the rational proofs as well, right?
Sure.
And so, but that's something that everyone's not going to get to, right? So, you know, as a teacher, I'm like, everyone needs to know this, but then I'm also realistic. I'm like, everyone's not going to know this, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they need to be placed in a situation and in a place where the environment kind of just does it for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for everyone else, yeah, okay, try to take the time to learn it, but everyone's not going to. So to save those people, put them in a community, put them in a place, put them in an environment, society where the society saves them from all that issue.
So a lot in America, so you know, I think American Muslims we want to have our cake and eat it too. So you have a lot of cats. Everyone knows, everyone their mom knows that everyone's trying to go to Dallas, right? And now I can't stand Dallas. I'll tell you straight up. But I mean, a lot of my friends live there. I could live there. Don't get me wrong. If I had to live there, I'd live there. It's not like it wouldn't be the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think there's just this like, and I want to tie this in. There's something on your IG because we talked about. I think one of the reasons people don't study is because they might feel like they're now accountable to something they just learned. That's really hard for them to do. And specifically, I remember, and I don't know if kind of DMs you get about some of these things you put out on fiqh. But there was this one where if a woman beautifies her face, like wears any makeup, niqab is obligatory, right?
Bila shak, without doubt.
Right. Right. And I was like, man, how do I like you try to lay that down? I mean, I know there's brothers trying to like establish like rujula and everything, but bro, some of us cats have been married for like 10 years and we've been letting like a little bit of makeup slide here and there, right? And now you'd be like, hey, none. Like I was like, what are you gonna? And culturally too, it's like when we were raised before we were married, like our aunts and our khalas and our grandmothers tell us like you need, because I was kind of I was a hardliner before I was married, right? And they were like, you got to ease. And I was saying my friends who were like super hardliners never got married. To this day, some of these dudes are in their 40s not married, right? And so I'm just like,
hit me up, by the way, if they're looking to get married. You know, I got something in mind. So just hit me up after this.
Oh, for my friends.
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'll let them know. Okay, so you know, so I'm just like, how do brothers like they'll learn something? You'll learn something in text. I'm trying to encourage my wife. Hey, like I was actually talking to her the other day. I was like, hey, I think it's time. I want to give you a gift as like Akida, like some kind of Akida course. And I'm looking around to see something I can have her take like online. She's busy, right, working and stuff. But and she's like, you know, I took an Akida course with like Yasser Qadi back in the day. I'm like, yeah, it's cool and everything, like, you know. But I'm like, have you ever read the Tahawiyah? He's like, well, I listened to some texts, you know, things here and there, but probably nothing structured, right? At some point, I'm just like, I need you to like put some time where you're learning something and not just a seminar that's like hype, right? I think that's what we got into. But like, how do you manage those kind of, especially these rulings with like women, and culture, and you know, you have non-Muslim family too, right?
I do.
I guess where do you like deal with that? And again, you mentioned Desi culture is very strong, right? Yeah, I mean, like there was a point in time when I was so hard line, I was alienating a lot of family members, right? I remember I skipped my parents' 25th anniversary party because it was like the imitation of the kuffar. That's what I told them.
Oh, fam.
Oh, 5. This still was 5, yeah. So, and but there's a lot of things that are, you know, but I don't know what's like, and they were like, you know, because they showed me pictures, and I was just like, no, you know, this is too harsh. Just honestly, just looking back, this is way too harsh. But I mean, you're talking about like you know how the Daisies, they have the bride and the groom set up, and then the whole the party, the wedding party where everything's going on. Right. We just, I feel like most of us, even though we're like, yeah, this probably ain't right, but like, we're just going to pick our battles and just ain't it. So when we deal with fiqh like that, when we read these in the texts, how do we know? Because sometimes people, because on the other hand, brothers might be like, man, you like a dayuth, man. I'm like, come on now. That's a little extreme too. Like, I don't know. But like knowing what you know, like no one's disputing the rulings in the books. Right? No one's arguing that. But it's like, how do I manage it? How do I implement that? Especially when it's someone, it's not like even me. It's not like I am the one that has to like stop wearing makeup, right? It's
Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah.
that I, you know, have
Yeah.
responsibility over.
You know, Bismillah, you asked a question that is actually very difficult for me. And one of the reasons it's difficult is because I don't just get flack from people who actually I wouldn't even say I get flack from the general public, because the general
Right.
public is hungry, right? They
Mm,
want to learn,
right.
right? Students want to learn. And so I actually get more flack from shuyukh, if you will. I don't even want to use the word shuyukh, but teachers
Mm,
and du'ats and other speakers and other individuals out there, because they're like, yo, you're being too strict. And I learned from this sheikh, and he said you don't have to rule that way. You're still reading this Mukhtasar Khalil, but once you get past that, you're gonna start realizing you don't really have to be like that. And I'm like, wala yajuz tasahhul bil fatwa, right? That there's a verse in this poem called Mutlahiyya, which says it's not allowed, it's impermissible, it's haram to give fatwa, right? Searching for ease, just straight up, just being like, I'm just trying to be easy for the person, right? Bel, in fact, you have to rule with the opinion that's aqwa, that's the strongest, right?
like
So just
strongest
because
in
you find a
evidence, not strictest, but strongest with evidence.
not exactly, not necessarily, because you could find something that is the strongest in evidence and the truth, right? But
Mm,
it's ridiculously easy,
right.
right?
Right.
But you're not going to, the point here is you're not just going to be searching for the weakest opinion just to make ease,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just to make ease, which is the exact opposite of what a lot of people say, right? Like, no, even if you find the weakest opinion, just find the weakest opinion, because, and grant ease to the person, because dina yusra, right? The religion is out of ease. So, my madhab is a little different on that, right? In terms of how my teachers raised me and whatnot. Um, but, to kind of answer, some of the questions though, is that when I'm speaking and I'm telling people, I'm talking to people about different rulings and whatnot and madhab, yeah, I might post something that is like straight up as is,
Right.
right? But then I have conversations with people, as you know, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I have some of the groups that I have, on
Right.
Telegram or
Right.
Discord and whatnot. And that's when we get into conversation. And that's when people will usually ask more. And they'll hit me up on WhatsApp, they'll hit me up on Telegram. We'll have the conversations. We'll start talking about, okay, but in reality, though, with your situation, with how things are going with your wife or your parents or your children, etc., like maybe you should probably look at it this way, or maybe you should, be a little bit patient. I just told you straight up that my wife is not wearing the niqab in the States,
Yeah.
right? So clearly, just from a experiential, reality, right? Like I might know the ruling as it is, right?
Right.
But it might not be something that I can just push at a certain place, right? In a certain time,
Mm-hmm.
right? I might have to kind of dance around it in a different way. So like I'm not gonna get into examples, but yeah, you have to. This is why every student of knowledge, when they begin studying and they look at the Hadith Jibreel,
Mm-hmm.
right? When they look at Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Islam being your fiqh, Iman being your aqidah, and Ihsan being your tasawwuf, right? And like those three things have to be there, because if they're not all there, then you get a person who has the fiqh, but then they're like unbearable. Like you cannot deal with them. You can't live with them. You can't be around them. And there are people who are like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I was just reading Abdul Shakur Brooks. He just wrote a Facebook post, and he feels a certain way about the self and about a lot of Sufi teachers and
He
whatnot.
was my
And
first. That's where I think I read Akhtari because he was at that free course on
the
Seekers
Akhdari,
Hub, the Seekers Hub
you are,
class,
yep,
way back in the
yep,
day. Yeah,
yep,
it's been a minute. Like because the Maliki fiqh, the Maliki madhab used to be really inaccessible. I would say like
yeah,
10 years ago, and he was
yeah,
one of the
yeah.
earliest, I think resources that was available. I remember to the
Yeah,
general
he's doing some
community.
amazing work, amazing work. But he had just this one post real quick, and he was talking about like some of these, goofy Sufis as we call them, right? And
Right.
he's right, he's right. And he was just, talking about it. I'm like, see, this is the problem though. The problem is when you have ihsan, but you have no fiqh,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it doesn't fly, it doesn't work.
Right.
And I think when you have that balance, it's a little easy for you to figure out how to, deal with these questions, these difficult questions that come up. And
The whole methodology of so we were having a conversation on WhatsApp the other day,
yeah,
about again this whole issue, going back to this issue of like praying for the deceased disbeliever, right? And like let's outline and maybe some of the people who are DMing you did, because one of the shuyuk in America actually sent me one of his like lectures on this that he did recently, and he was like, "Hey, I want to get your thought." I was like, I listened to half of it, partially because on the Mad Mamluks podcast, my co-host Mort like just went nuts on this issue, and as far as like the harshest position possible, as far as like not praying for her and yada yada. Why are we praying? Yeah, okay, she did some good stuff, but like those same people need to bring the same energy for these Muslims that died, right? Kind of thing, right? Kind of whatever, because that's still whatever, So, anyways, what we're dealing here in America is, and this is a good example because it's recent, is that and I live in like a Palestinian community, right? And it's kind of like this running joke that the Arab in here is like they have like some of the sloppiest fiqh around. Like they're as far as like eating everything but pork. McDonald's has been halal because since the 80s we checked out the slaughterhouses and stuff, and it's all gravy and stuff, and you know what I'm saying.
Literally,
you like might get Subway at suhoor at the masjid, that kind of thing, right? With that being said, like one of the imams at one of the major masajid in this area give this ruling that, hey, listen, there's a difference between praying for rahmah and praying for forgiveness. Now, when you read it as a layperson, you would say this makes sense. It's a logical kind of case, right? Kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got Shayukur come in saying like, nah, this goes against the ijma, this goes against this, and then you have, as you get this back and forth, and the framing of this, and I want to get your take on how does a layperson deal with this. So I'm in this WhatsApp group, and with like 5 or 6 brothers, and we're talking about another video, like the video that the Sheikh sent me of himself about giving his own, like, because he's talking about like, well, and it's kind of the angle of, well, we have to understand where converts coming from, and it's very hard for them, and we should.
Was it a convert that said this, by the way?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. So it's like empathy. We'd have empathy for this kind of thing, and whatever. And he's not even saying that this is my own personal position. It's just like the community we're dealing with, they're on the fringe already. And if there's an easy opinion that I can give them to just keep them on this side of the fringe versus like flipping over, I'm going to do that. Versus the Mashayikh who say, well, Islam is submission. It is what it is. Yeah. Take it or leave it, right? I'm not going to change it for you, right? And then when you look at credentials, and both of them have studied, both of them are learned, graduate, from, and some could argue that even the people who make the position, the statement of, and I actually made this argument. I don't agree with his conclusion, but I think his credentials are stronger from what he studied versus this other person, right? Even though I agree with the other person, you know what I mean? But a layperson sees that, and they're just going to be confused because, and how does what's the approach that a layperson needs to take to try to come at this objectively? Obviously, and by the way, no one's objective because you're always coming at it with your own biases as well, right?
Yeah. So there's 2 things I want to say. One of them is the sifat that you look for, the characteristics and attributes that you look for when you look for a teacher,
right?
Because I think that's relevant here. And the other one I want to go back to real quick is Hijrah, right? And the only reason I want to make that point though is because this is one of those examples of why when you live in an area where you are the minority, if you will,
right, and
you're carrying Islam on your back, and it's a burden, and you need to show up and try to show other people that you're not this harsh, monstrous, lack of mercy type of individual, and your religion isn't that, then what you have to do as a necessity is potentially find ways to prove that through your faith and your text and scripture, etc. Right? And so even if I'm just being objective at the moment, even if the faith were to say that generally speaking, you're not supposed to, right? You're going to say, okay, generally speaking, but what specifically? Right? Yeah. What can I find specifically to show not even myself, right? But to show others that I'm not what they think I am. And then subsequently, once I prove that to them, then I'll subsequently be more accepted, and I'll feel better
Mhm.
about myself, feel better about my religion, and then I can
Right.
keep going because it's really hard to keep going.
Right.
And those are the type of things that I talk about when I say when you leave, you no longer, that's not even a discussion that you deal with anymore. Like you just don't have that problem. Um, but how does a layperson find this? So I get this issue a lot because I'm very openly, uh, very recently, I've been more open about tasawwuf.
Mhm.
I wasn't, even when I was initially studying, not open about this.
Mhm.
And I'm very, very open about madhahib and the obligatory nature of following one of the four, right? Agreed
Right.
upon madhahib. And so I get a lot of questions about not just opinions, but even like, why do I have to follow madhab? And why do I have to follow Maliki madhab? And why do I have to, like these type of things?
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of, I don't get a lot of confusion, but there are times where someone will be like, okay, but Sheikh so and so said this, and now you're saying this, and you don't even call yourself a Sheikh. So I should probably be following the actual Sheikh then, right? And I'm like, yani برحتك, that's what you're gonna do, and that's what you're gonna do, but it's wrong. Um,
Right. Right.
no, with all love, with all love,
Yeah,
with
of
all love.
course.
But I would just say, look, and this is definitely not, when I say this is not even speaking about myself, because it's really not. But you need to find a person who their akhlaq is nabawi, right?
Mhm.
Their akhlaq is 100% to the best of their ability. They're trying. You can see that they're trying. Is prophetic, right? The way they carry themselves, the way they
Mhm.
act. Sheikh Jamal Dewan had posted something recently that really made me reflect, which was I think either he was talking to a student or someone had mentioned to him, or I can't remember the exact, sila and everything that was. But the point was, there was a time and a place where to be a da'i, to be a teacher, to be a sheikh in the West meant you dressed in a certain way, you spoke in a certain way, you carried yourself in a certain way. And because of that, people were attracted to you and said, I want to be like that person. Whereas now, especially with the whole influencer, movement and whatnot, it's like
Mhm.
you're just trying to be like everyone else,
Right.
right? Like I just want to be cool. I just want to be able to, work with the people, and it's kind of taken away some of that, reverence that we have for the Deen and its ilm and everything else. That haiba, right, as we would say in the Arabic language, and so. When laity is looking, that's one of the alamats. That's one of the signs they're supposed to look for. By the way, it's the type of person that um, externally exhibits those sifat, those
Mhm.
characteristics. They look the part,
Right.
right? But sometimes it's hard to find someone who even looks the part nowadays because we all wearing, some Tom Ford, suits. You know what I'm saying? We all got like our,
Mhm.
Dior, cologne and whatnot. So,
Right.
sometimes it's hard. But laity should definitely look for a person who looks the part, who speaks, in the way, and also, as you mentioned, the credibility. The credibility, though, when it comes to like where you've studied and how you've studied, unfortunately, is not the best alama nowadays,
Mm.
right? It's not the best sign nowadays. And the reason for that is because you can speak to anyone, at least in Azhar. I can speak for that specifically because that's where I've come from and the tutelage that I've come from. The vast majority of people did not study in the university, right? Right? They went to the university, and the majority of it was in Madhya Faladoui, right? The majority of it was with some random sheikh, who had classes in his home or had classes in a certain masjid, and you'd go there, Sheikh Yusuf Jabri, for example, Ma'al Qattam, or these places.
Mhm.
They'd study with these particular mashayikh, Sheikh Fawzi Qanati and others. That's where they would get their real tutelage. And so they might not look on paper like they got so much, but in
Mhm.
reality, that's like in Fez,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like those are the people who really had their ilm.
Mm.
So it is hard. It is hard because we have everyone under the sun is in the same place.
Mhm.
Everyone has different, backgrounds, and they're all saying that what they're pointing to is the haq. And I'd say people got to make lots of dua, makes lots of istikhara,
Mhm.
and try not to go window shopping with your fatwa and your
Right.
learning. Like trying to find one person, and this is why it's important to learn a madhab,
Right. Right.
right? Because then at least you have a foundation to kind of pull from, and you can kind of like, okay, this isn't based on my foundation. This isn't based on the usul that I've learned,
Right.
right? So I'm not gonna fly with that.
But when you
I don't
have
know if I
someone
answered
from
your
your,
question, but I
but
tried.
now when you have someone from your madhab saying, "Well, you can take this opinion from another madhab because it's like I get what you're saying. At the end of the day, I feel like at some point you got to know where you stand, and at some point you got to know, hey, I'm just wasting. If I'm in this conversation, this becomes a waste of time at the end of the day, right? We're not gonna
That too.
like, you know what I'm saying. You just got to know when you got to stop. Like it ain't
That too.
going nowhere, right? Now it sounds to me, are you advocating hijrah for all
I'm not
Muslims in
advocating
America?
hijrah.
Are
It's
you?
wajib alaikum. It is what yo look. Do I sound like I'm from like old school or something? But yo, yeah, y'all gotta leave. I don't know what to say. Like, like it is what it is.
No, but
Like,
so because people will argue it. Well, we don't have a khilafah; it has to be a state or that kind of
man,
stuff.
those people need to shut up because guess what? Guess what? If that person, not you, but if
Yeah.
that person want to be like, oh, we don't have a khilafah, y'all had a khilafah, y'all didn't want to go, did y'all? I didn't think so. Right? So don't even
Mm,
play that. Don't even play that. Right? And of course, I wouldn't have told anyone to go to that anyways because
right.
it wasn't right. Right? But the point
You're not
being is
talking
that
about like the state, like the recent one. Not you're not
yeah,
talking about the
I'm
Ottomans.
talking. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm
You're
talking
talking about
about
the
these
Ottomans.
states. Yeah, no, I'm talking about the Ottomans. I'm talking about those crazy people that came after.
Oh,
Right? Everyone's like, oh, Khilafah, we need a Khilafah before we go anywhere. Okay, well, y'all had black flags and everything. Y'all stayed put. Y'all stayed put.
so what are the conditions? Okay, so certainly a location must have conditions for hijrah, right? What are
Yeah.
those conditions in a baseline?
Look, the most important thing, and one of the reasons why Hijrah is wajib, and without getting to too much, because then I need to go and review a bit quite myself, because I don't like talking without,
Right.
without I.
Right.
But one of the important things is having a hakim that is Muslim,
Mm.
right? So the ruler, the hakim, right,
So if you
needs to
make
be
takfir
Muslim.
of him, though, then it doesn't count.
If
I
you make
guess
takfir of
that's
him,
that's the problem.
you
A lot
got
of
to
these
make
cats,
takfir.
a lot of these cats they call them tagut and stuff, so they're like, oh, we don't gotta like.
Yeah. Yeah, yo, ulama sultan, and like, this hakim is not really this and really that. But look, the hakim is Muslim. Now the
Right.
question is he a good Muslim?
Right.
Right? And then the
Right.
question I have to ask for you is, do you know anything about Islamic history?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because if you open any book of Islamic history, you're gonna be asking your question a lot,
Right.
right? About was this good Muslim or not? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And was it allowed for this? Is this person even Muslim according to your standards, right? Because if you're saying that the Muslims today weren't Muslim, a lot of these fukan were not Muslim, then to be honest with you, you'd have a very hard time living throughout Islamic history because you're probably going to find a lot of them not to be Muslim. If this is how you feel,
Right.
when people talk about places like the Emirates, for example, or Saudi, right,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about the leaders here, I'm like, fam, you truly, truly, like, I understand where you're coming from. I do understand because, again, we're coming from the West with a certain mentality of how Islam has to be perfect because it needs to outdo others, right? Right? We need to be able to show other people that look at our Islam. It's so great. It's so amazing. That's why I hold on to it, even though everyone else around me is not.
Mm.
Right? That's where we're coming from. And so when we see displays of Islam that aren't in accordance to what Islam in our heads needs to be, it's like that can't be Islam, right? That just can't be. But it's like, look, you have to be realistic as well, because honestly and truly, you open up a book of Islamic history, you're going to see worse than this. Like this is nothing. This is literally nothing. And I'm not saying this to, like, shake anybody up or anything like that. You go to Yasser God if you want to be shook up, right? But I mean, I'm just being realistic. I'm just being really realistic. These people are not as bad as you like to make them out to be. But anyways, the point is when it comes to hijrah, yes, unless you have I'm using some terminology here that hopefully doesn't get me in trouble. I'll just translate it, right? Unless you have a group of Muslims that take the position of a Muslim ruler and have legal ability to do so, right, to exact law, etc., then and in your country, right? And so let's say in the US, right, they have legal ability to give laws and to judge based on those laws in certain states, then first of all, only those states you're allowed to live in.
Okay.
Right? And that's only at the dispense that there is no hakim that you can go and live under. Right? So bare minimum, you technically should be living in a Muslim country under a hakim. And again, the discussion about is he adil or not adil, fair or just, etc., and not just. I mean, those are all discussions that are there, and I understand them. Of course. But look, like, it is what it is, right?
Do you think it's do you think it's practical, or do you think it's just like people haven't thought about it enough to like really understand how practical it could be?
It's scary. It's scary. That's what it is. It's just very scary. And I'll say that For people in the UK, I found that it's a lot easier
Hmm.
because the UK it's just a different cultural reality. For people in America, it's very different, and that's because Americans in general don't go anywhere,
Mm.
right? Like take out the immigrant population, the you know the Daisies and the Arab and et cetera, because obviously they travel back home, right? But for indigenous Americans that have been there for for years now, hundreds of years now, like they don't go anywhere, right? They really don't. Like we're the same people that have to fight ourselves to take our own paid vacation time, right?
Right.
And even then, we like to do staycations and not actually go
Correct.
anywhere.
Because you're
So
catching up on
like
you're catching up on laundry. That's where your vacation is.
exactly, yeah, So like we don't like traveling, and so because of and we're scared to travel. And then when we do travel, we have this air of like it's not as good as America. I'm only here to kind of like hang with you serfs until I go back to my real country, right? A real country, a first world country. Um, so because of that, I think it's very scary for people to imagine leaving all of that, right? And
Mm.
that's why I speak so highly of the Emirates and like what's available here and what's there, because you're not really missing anything. In fact, when I go back to the States, I'm like, yo, this place dirty. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like your roads are horrible, right? Why are the police tracking me on the streets when like you could just have like a robot that like gives me my ticket?
Sure. The other places that people do talk about are like Turkey and Malaysia. You mentioned those briefly. It sounds to
Mm-hmm.
me like you chose the Emirates because your teachers were or had connections there,
Yeah, and
and
also because Turkey, you're not going to get too much. You don't know what's going to change there,
because
right?
of the
Like things
Ak
could change.
Party, politically
Yeah,
speaking. Okay.
things could change like right, like real quick, you know.
Mm.
And so because of that, Turkey was one of the reasons that I didn't add Turkey. I had Turkey on my list, but it's one of the reasons I didn't go there because things could change so quickly, and it's like, oh God, like now where am I going? Malaysia, okay, different. Malaysia, definitely, I would tell people if they want to Malaysia, yeah, Bismillah, mashallah, yalla, go. Indonesia, Bismillah, mashallah,
But
yalla,
in
go.
Malaysia, because it's not I guess my concern with Malaysia is like because Arabic isn't the native language, and I guess maybe this goes
Turkey
back
is
to
the
the
same thing.
at least I
Yo,
can.
yeah.
But
At
aren't there
least
like a
what?
lot of Syrian mashayikh there now?
There are a lot of them, but you'll find that again, like for people I know, and I know a lot of people. I'm still in the Telegram group for the folks in Turkey. Mashallah, shout out to the
Mm,
Istanbulites or whatever y'all
mm,
call yourselves.
sure.
But there's a lot of people that are out there, and that's one of the difficulties they have is the language. They do have a problem with the language. A
Mm.
lot of them have to learn it. They're taking classes. They're putting their children in those classes. And for me, I'm like, man, I'm putting my daughter in Arabic classes, man. And so this, um, yeah, I would say over Turkey, even I would say Malaysia.
Yeah.
Turkey's nice, but I don't think it's. I like Arab countries.
You just think there's a volatility because I've asked that question. I've asked people because a lot of people are putting a lot of their eggs in their basket into Turkey, right?
Yes,
Right
they
now,
are.
right?
They are.
A lot of
They are.
people every time you look, someone's moving there, like settling
Yes.
down. And when I
Yes.
asked them about the Ak Party, and they were like, "Listen, man, yeah, maybe they might be run out, but Kemalism is dead because
Yeah.
of these guys were the Ottomans for they've at least realized that that's who they were for 600 years,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it may be a little less religious if there's not the Ak Party, but it's not going
Yeah.
to go back to Kemalism."
Yeah. I mean, it's. I don't think it's gonna go back to anything like that at all. I really don't think so.
Right.
Um, I just feel that unless you're comfortable, again, you're not going there for D. And I think a lot of people when they go to Turkey, specifically Turkey, they're going there because they're like, oh, I'm going to live in a Muslim country. Like this is like, first of all, at least the Emirates and Saudi and the Khalij in general and some of these countries, like I can actually say, like, even though you might not like it, they are run by Sharia. Like their laws 100% go through a Sharia process. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Mm,
Turkey is not like that, right? There are
right.
things that are straight up not allowed under the Turkish government in the Turkish system because
Mm,
they see it as being wrong and it's completely Sharia compliant. Like, I ain't doing
right.
no wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so those are certain things, but
What about
um,
have you felt race there's also the knock on the Khalid for being racist as a black man in the Emirates. Have you experienced
yeah,
that at all or
yeah. Expats. I don't give myself that title, right? Expats experience a lot of racism. When I'm in a place, I am of those people, right? When I'm in Cairo, I dress like I'm from Aswan, right? Which is well, for them it's Upper Egypt, but for us it's technically South, right? That's where all the that's all the black people come from, right? But I dress like that's where I'm from, and also in Cairo you have a lot of people from Nigeria and places like that, anyways. Yazul, that's what you always hear people calling me that's what they call the Sudanese folks out there. But that's how it is here. Same thing, right? I dress like I am a local, right? And so I carry myself in a way where I'm not some expat, guy from whatever country. And so generally speaking, that's actually opened a lot of doors for me. And it's I haven't had a lot of them closed on me at all because of that, right? In terms of racism, yeah, I think a lot of the racism is a big class issue here because you opened the door right here. So Arab, especially here, they're very Arab. They're very into their qabila, right? The first question actually that people will ask you, like even when I go to the UFC gym and I'm doing BJJ and I meet somebody, they ask me, what qabila are you from? Right? And then I have to tell them like, I'm American. They're like, American. And they're like, how are you American? Like, because even their understanding, even when they see me, like even without my, imama on and things like my khutbah on and things like that, they actually assume that I'm Emirati, right? Because they black out here too.
Right.
I try to show a lot of people this actually on social media. Like there's a lot, like I literally met this one uncle. I'll tell you guys, it's really funny. He just got married actually right before Ramadan. He's 86 years old. I'm like, fam, like mashallah alik.
Mashallah.
But I walk into their home, right, for in Ramadan, we're having iftar. 86-year-old. And my friend at the time introduced me, and he introduced me to the whole family. There's like 20 children, like mashallah, like 3 wives, crazy. And
polygamy. So polygamy is also a game there too. So anybody's looking for polygamy, it's
mad normal. It's mad normal here. Wide. Like it's people don't talk about it. Like, so you're not going to get like a whole bunch of brothers be like, oh, I'm married, because they don't talk about their families. In fact, they say that one of the reasons that the Arab knew that Sayyidina Maryam was not the wife of Allah was because she was named specifically in the Quran. Because the Arab would never name, right, his wife, all right, and use her name in public. So that was one of the ways that the Arab knew. And that has stayed until today, right? Until today, that concept has stayed. Right. But so they'll never talk about it. But anyhow, so I go in the house and introduce myself and whatnot. And the uncle comes to me and he's like, where are you from? Right? Which qabila are you from? And my friend's like, no, he's American. He's like, he's not American, right? There's no way he's American. His father, right? Of course, he's saying all this in Arabic, right? His father moved min Yemen. From Yemen, went to America, married an American woman, right? Halal. It's a lot for him.
Right.
And he came from that, and now he's coming back home. No, I'm legit. I'm Jamaican, fam. But the point is, like, they can't really tell the difference.
And I think what you're highlighting too is that because a lot of people have like the fear, also people going to the Emirates specifically, is that like it's so corporate. It's like it's a bunch of expats and there's no community, right? So it seems like your key has been don't kick it with the expats, kick it with like the locals.
I don't know any expats.
Word?
I don't know expats. My family likes to connect with them, like, so the family likes to because it's like it's more comfortable. And
is your wife also Jamaican?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
So likes to kick it with the expats and whatnot because it makes them feel more comfortable, right? But for me, like I never, like literally never, like I just don't, like everyone I connect with is yeah.
Right. By the way, I just want to check in with you. How much? It's right now. It is 11 a.m. your time. Are you good for like another 20 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's cool. Okay. So, because I want to segue real quick into like so now to learn that Hijrah is obligatory, you have to study first, or you listen to this podcast.
Of course.
But this podcast might be. Still might be like, wait a second, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be like, what about all these institutions we're building and all these mashayikh? And I think the Shayukh just probably realized, well, people aren't making hijrah, so I might as well, we just got to make do what we got, right? So you're not advocating for people to like I shouldn't go tell Sheikh Amin like, hey, you got to shut down Darul Qasim. I'm not putting more money here. We got to go make
No,
hijrah.
no, no,
You're not saying
no,
that,
no,
right?
no, 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 not at all, not at all.
Okay.
Especially not someone like Sheikh Amin.
Right.
Not ever, not ever.
Okay. So like
Yeah,
they're obviously building institutions because the reality is there's the ruling and then what people are going to actually execute. And the reality is they're not going anywhere, right? Maybe a few of us, like I've been talking about, like I've been telling my wife Morocco for like Fez 6 months, and then maybe we can go somewhere else. Or and I've been trying to position myself where it's like in my company they can send me to like Malaysia or Turkey or UAE or something like that. Maybe those options possibly are there.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not but again to learn that ruling again and to understand like what constitutes the land to go make hijrah to and all that stuff, and so you're not confused that like the rulers are all kuffar and this and that. You got to learn. So when we talk about, and I think you and I were discussing this as well a few months on IG checks, I hit you up and you're obviously someone who is, you are, and we can, man, I don't know how, I can't do a 2-hour podcast with you. I need like 4 hours or something. But anyways, the thing about studying, the question I always get asked is, what are your goals? Right? And most of us are not like going to be studying to a level of, and if you were to ask me like point blank, I'm like, I would like to get, so right now it's like people are like, okay, well, I'd like to learn Arabic. Everyone wants to know Arabic. If you straight up ask them, I think everyone has a desire to want to learn Arabic, to understand the Quran without a translation, to be able to read it and then reflect and make tadabbur. You know what I mean? Obviously, they should also learn the creed, right? They should learn the Fard al-Ain, right? And stuff like that. But I feel like from a goal point, when people say that's my goal, like it's not, when you talk about himma, right? You're talking about like pushing yourself. Do you think people are too aggressive in their goals? Or do you think people are just don't have goals? Or is it just, what I feel is like, there's and this is what we can get into, is that your time is consumed. And this is the problem with living in a city like Chicago, right? There's so many options. So like this weekend, I don't know if you know Sheikh Mohammed. So at the masjid, brothers will send you a bunch of flyers like, you got to come to this program because Sheikh Mohammed Shinawi from Allentown's in town doing a program at Mecca Center, right? Last weekend there was this conference that we're not converts, but I can go. There's like benefit the believers, so go check it out. People are hitting you up. Next weekend there's a retreat at Dar es Salaam, whatever, right? So I think what's going on is, my assessment is that some people are like, well, they're going to all these programs, but they're not getting depth, right?
100%.
Some people are just like, not get, and some people have done that for years, not get depth, realized it, and they're like, well, I just spun my wheels for 8-9 years. What do I still, and I still, if somebody asks me something basic, I still won't know. And they just gave up. So we have all these resources, and there's all this like this guilt trip too. You're like, okay, I'm in Chicago, and you have like Sheikh Amin, or you have Darul Qasim, or wherever, or you're in wherever city you're at with Sheikh so and so. And you feel this guilt about not utilizing it. And but then you don't have a program in place. Like, I guess, how do you manage it? Maybe being in Orlando for you was a good thing because it was a smaller town and you didn't have as much distraction. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, seeking knowledge is significantly easier when you have a teacher.
Okay.
Or if you have an example of what seeking knowledge looks like.
Right.
Because when you don't have an example, you end up like, as you're saying, like so many people who they see a seminar, they see a flyer, they're like, oh, I got to go here this weekend, got to go there this weekend. Like, I have my whole month charted out, but there's no barnumage, there's no curriculum, right? It's just like here, there, and everywhere. And that can be, it can hurt, as you said, like when you look back years later and you're like, what have I actually, gotten? And I think there's a need for all of that because, again, we're just trying to fill a void in this. When it comes to the States, it's really just filling a void, right? A void of having strong institutions. Like Darul
Right.
Qasim is one, Zaytuna is one, Qalam
Right.
Institute is another.
Right.
Allentown, they have Maqasid, there's Taysir Seminary,
Right.
Bayan. There's a lot of places that are jumping, that are growing right now, but they're still in their baby stages. They're still very new,
Yep.
you know. Um, and it's going to take 50 years, 100 years until we really, really start seeing like true Muslim communities
Mm-hmm.
that are based on now the new Arab and Desi immigrants that have come in the last 60, 70 years or so. Because the African American community obviously did this before, right? But
Mm-hmm.
those communities didn't really we didn't really intersect with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then grow them. And so they kind of went to the wayside. And then Arab and Desi kind of just started everything new. So to get where the African American communities got, it's going to take another 100 years,
Yeah.
It's going to take time. But my thing is, look, a person has to find a sheikh. They have to find a teacher. And a lot of people don't like that statement, but they have to, because I remember when I first decided to go study, I was, so I also came to the whole Maghrib route. I was the Emir of the Qabila.
Oh, no
I
kidding.
studied with, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I came to that route. And then I studied with Sheikh Walid Manisi, Sheikh Walid Basuni were some of my initial teachers.
Mm.
Sheikh Yasser Khalid is the one who got me married. So like, that circle is where I started. And I remember studying, I remember deciding actually that this Muslim thing ain't gonna work for me, right? Because I need an actual curriculum. And this curriculum of like this like seminar over a weekend is just not, it doesn't
Every three
suffice. Like
months. Yeah.
yeah, like, so I was like, okay, how do I start studying? And because I had people like Sheikh Walid Manisi and Sheikh Walid Basuni, and at the time, Dr. Ali Shahata, who was also did a quick stunt as an instructor,
Mm.
I kind of realized that, okay, you pick a book, you sit with a teacher, and you read through the entire book,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. But then it kind of came to this conclusion of, because they kept mentioning Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Uthaymeen, and I was like, all right, Sheikh Uthaymeen, what did he study? I don't want to study his books. Right? I came to the point where I was like, I don't want to study his books. I want to study what he studied. Like, what was his curriculum? When he went to school, what did he study? That was actually the
Mm.
question I asked.
Right.
And they were like, well, he was Hanbali. I was like, okay, so I don't want this concept of like this madhab and like the best opinion of the two was this one. No, I want to study literally the Hanbali madhab, right? And so when I started studying that, that's the first big thing. I got a book that Imam Joe Bradford had translated at the time. And I had gotten that book. And I remember it was that book and something else that I was reading at the time. I think the Sheikh Musa Ferber had the translation of something as well, because he also translated a few books in there from the Hamdi Madhab. And I remember just the simplest mas'ala of when praying, the concept of feet to feet, right? Which used to be like the biggest fitna in the world, right? Like COVID, alhamdulillah, alleviated this, right? But prior, it used to be like the biggest fitna. Like, you are not praying properly unless you are literally foot to foot with the person. I remember like the complete hadith being written out and looking into hadith, and it mentioned like foot to foot, ankle to ankle, knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder, etc. Right. And I was like, hold on, how you do knee to knee? Like,
we'd have you ever prayed in my masjid in Columbus? You'd have a brother an auditor at the end of the line checking, and be like, brother Maheen, left foot 3 inches, 3 centimeters back, kind of thing, right? Or he come correct you and stuff, right? Yeah, because ankle to ankle, they were lined up, right?
Yeah.
And
and it's fine to be lined up, right? To be lined up, but the concept was, is it like or is your prayer not even valid, right? Because even that question, like, what does it mean for it not to be valid? Are you saying literally that it is not la yusih, like literally prayer is not valid? Or are you saying that it's something that's makruh, something that's disliked? Like, these were the questions I had in my head, but I didn't know the terminology. I didn't know the mustalahat, right? So I was like, well, technically, what are you saying? So that's why when I started reading, and I was like, oh, okay, like I want to study the madhab. So I started a class actually, and I realized like, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to be studying a madhab. And that's when I decided I'm just going to pick up and I'm going to go. But to answer the question though, I feel a person needs to find a sheikh. They need to find a teacher who can take them through a curriculum. So you as an individual, right, whoever's listening, needs to take the onus upon yourself, not the community, not the society around you, not any of the shuyukh, because the shuyukh are waiting on you, by the way. A lot of the teachers in your masajid, you could probably learn Arabic from a random uncle in the masjid if you actually just went to them every single day and said, look, I need you after Maghrib to go through this book with me, right? He probably doesn't know jack squat, but guess what? Most Arabs, right, went through Nahu, Sarf, and Balagha in high school, right? Your grammar, your verb morphology, and rhetoric. right? They went through that already. So they could go through a very basic book. And by the way, any book that you might have in mind that you're thinking is probably like this huge book for a student of knowledge and blah, blah, blah is like a child's book, to study, to start studying with. So you can just bring it to anyone, right? And Allah bless you, honestly and truly. And you can start learning Arabic that easily and have accountability because that uncle's going to hold you accountable.
Right.
But there's going to come a time where these uncles are not going to be here anymore and you're going to miss out on the teacher.
Well, I've got to ask, why did you like decide to bail the Hanbali madhab and go to the Maliki school? Or is that another? Or is that a big story?
No, so I was good with the Hanbali school. I was good with it. I loved it. It was beautiful. But when I moved to Cairo, because I decided to move to Cairo, I found myself somehow, literally somehow, surrounded by Malikis. Right. In fact, the first person that I had met, or the first teacher I had met, not the first person, but the first teacher that I had met was a former mufti or at the time he was a mufti actually in the Dar al-Iftah, the house of fatwa, if you will, of Cairo, of Egypt. And he taught, studied, and, gave fatwa based on the Maliki school. And he was there. And I remember him just saying to me that, look, you take from what your teacher has. Right. And I was like, what you got?
Yeah.
And he kind of, he told me, this is what I've studied, this is what I teach. And I was like, okay, if you're going to teach me this from beginning to end,
yeah,
right, then I'm with you, right? And so I started studying with him, and he took me literally, to Aqrab bin Salik, which is, I would say, an intermediate text. And now I'm with another teacher, Sheikh Zuhair Qazan, who, is taking me to,
Sure. So now, so with that being said, like, what is the approach of Markaz Imam Malik? Who is Markaz Imam Malik for? What's the audience? Like,
Yeah.
So what are you doing there?
Yeah. So the purpose of Markaz Imam Malik is the same thing that the intention needs to be, to go back to your question earlier, what the intention needs to be for the laity when it comes to studying, which is to remove the satr, remove the hedges, the hijab, the boundary that's around us, which is ignorance, right? Just to remove the ignorance. That's the bare minimum. And to understand the fara'id, the things that are obligatory on you on your everyday life. If you can walk away with that, as my friend, and my old friend would say, you Gucci, right? That's all you need. Right. So Markaz Imam Malik, that's the goal there, right? So right now, for example, we're doing a 1-year dawrah where we just finished. So I taught fiqh, and my Ustad, Sheikh Haroon, taught tasawwuf. Sheikh Muhammad taught Tariqat al-Sharia, or the history of Sharia, and Sheikh Tariq taught Aqidah. Khadida, was it Khadida? I don't remember Khadida. But he taught it next semester. We're getting into Nahu, Adab al-Bahr al-Munadhara, the study of research and anyways, we're getting into some of these other subjects, Mustalah al-Hadith, etc. So the goal is for a person to be able to learn the basics that they need to know, right? And for the dawrah, I would even say it's more than the basics. For the dawrah, the 1-year dawrah, this is like for people who are like, I want to be serious. But we also have these quick, like month-long, 2-month-long, classes where you can learn like everything you need to learn in terms of the basics of fiqh, right? And it's my opinion that, look, if a person takes a day a week to study an hour, right, for the next 5 years of their life, right, you will know everything you need to know about Islam and more, right? In reality, we take more than that to watch God knows how many shows, right? Like the 10 seasons of Charmed back in the day, right, would have given you all you needed to know on Islam if you had, replaced that time with, some studies. But that's what we have available. MarkazImamMalik.com. You go on there, you can register, you can join us on our Telegram chats.
And you got to start, but you have to know Arabic, right? Or is there English program?
So there's an Arabic program and there's an English. So I teach in the English side of things, right? And then we have the Arabic side as well, which is usually directly with the sheikh.
Gotcha. So I'll just real quick, like as we wrap up here, I think what I'm doing is like, so just about, it's as we were talking offline before the show, I was like, hey, I've been like, came through the Maghrib, and then you realize you got a job now. The job takes time, fitness takes time, so finally I've taken Arabic through other institutes, and it's like something I feel like I'm throwing mud on the wall. Finally, I started Studio Arabia last October. And I feel like
Okay. Yeah.
first time, I feel like something's actually sticking. Maybe because the
Hmm.
conversational, maybe because one on one, there's a teacher.
Yep.
Like I
Yep.
can't like not come for home. Like if I don't like show up and unprepared, it's gonna be embarrassing. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line, right? There's that
Yep.
innate
Yep.
pressure of it, right? Um, Once you do that, and then you read a Tahawiyah through a seminar or something like that, but then in a place like Chicago, would you just say go study theology with a teacher here, and then if it's Maliki fix my interest, yeah, I've taken some coursework in English. Yeah, Sheikh Hamza Makbul in town, right, in Chicago,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
he taught like the Risala, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have those like opportunities, but is it worth it just to like, hey, tell a guy like a Sheikh Hamza like, hey, I need you to teach this class book to me, kind of thing, and just bust it through, and then we'll start a class, kind of thing. I guess that's kind of that's kind of what I'm thinking. But it's just even just getting the Arabic 2 hours a week is
Yeah.
extremely
It's a
challenging.
lot.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's extremely challenging. My friend
But
told me to do
Mahim,
it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I would just say though that the Arabic, I think this is something that's very important for people to understand. Is going back to your question about what are your goals.
Mm,
Arabic's not needed, right? Like it's important, it's beautiful, it's something that, inshallah, I hope and I pray that everyone at some point in time can learn it. But I also know that's not realistic.
right.
Right? It's not realistic for us to have this whole like mentality of like, oh, the whole Muslim world needs to know Arabic again. Like that's not going to happen right now. It might happen in the future. There might be
Mm,
some circumstances that allows for that to occur. But
right.
right now we're in a place where English is the dominant language of the world, right? And so that's where that's inshallah with Mecca Books. That's what I'm aiming to do. And I know some other publishers and
Right.
organizations and businesses that do the same. But creating curriculums for Muslims in the English language, your fiqh and your fiqh studies and your aqidah studies can all be done in English, right? A
Mm,
lot of us, not you, but a lot of us, and I've done this, and Allah forgive me. A lot of us just like to learn Arabic so that we can show other people that we know
mm.
Arabic, right? And Allah forgive me for that, but it sometimes just turns into like oh, look at me, I have the key, you don't, ha ha ha, right? But that person could know more fiqh than I do, right?
But don't you have to like so like let's say a book of theology?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you just have access to more books if you have Arabic, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but if a person, for example, studies a book that's already translated in English and knows it very well,
Hmm.
right? Then at the end of the day, they know their theology. Because what theology do you really need to know? You just need
Right.
to know who your
Is
Allah, who your Lord is,
right.
and who the prophets and messengers are, what's wajib to believe about them, what's impossible for them, and
Right.
what's Islam and Medina.
Right.
Is that the
Islam.
book you
Yeah.
got there?
Yeah. This one right here.
Yeah, I
Right.
know that book well. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
is this like something that because I studied this with parts of this with a teacher, right?
Yeah.
But it was
Okay.
fragmented. But he also brought his own ideology and biases and stuff, and we got to skip over this part. You know what I
That book
mean?
is already biased, but yeah, I got you.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
But I think
yeah.
it's just like, where do you I guess in a Maliki school for Akira,
Mhm.
what's if there's an English book, what is it? With I guess with obviously preface with the teacher, but is it Sheikh Hamza's Tahawiyah?
So look, the book Ibn Ashir
Yeah.
is the book,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, that is the book, right?
This book
Because
right here is the one stop shop.
it is a one stop shop, right?
Mm,
And I'm not saying that particular nuskha,
okay.
right? A particular nuskha, because there's some things in there, right? But Ibn Ashir in general, because what does he say? He says in that text, he even says it. في العقد الأشعري وفقه المالك وفي طريقة جنيد السالك,
Mm,
right? To have the aqidah of Imam al-Ash'ari,
you're right.
to have the jurisprudence of Imam Malik,
Yeah.
and to have the inner path or the tariqah of tasawwuf
Mm,
of Imam al-Junaid,
mm,
right? And you're good. That's all you as a Muslim needs, right? You just need those three things. And if you got them, going back to Hadith Jibreel, your
right.
Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, Islam,
Right.
your fiqh, Iman, your aqidah, Ihsan, being your tasawwuf. If you got those, you're Gucci, you're good. Alhamdulillah, everything's all right. So yeah, I think Ibn Ashir is a great book. I think you had mentioned that Abdul Shakur Brooks had a class on it. I am pretty sure Hamza Yusuf, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has a class on it because
Mhm.
that I'm almost 100% sure that his like PhD was in something of this nature, or
Right,
his master's or something
right.
was in Ibn Ashur. So there's a lot of resources out there in the English language to cover this.
Yeah.
Markazi Imam Malik, we cover it. You can holler at me on social media. We
Okay.
can go over it. But yeah,
So you guys had the English class of that as well.
yeah, for
Okay.
sure, for sure, for
Bet,
sure,
bet,
for
bet. All
sure.
right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. I tied you up for a couple hours.
Habibi,
I
Habibi.
could have gone for another hour, man. There's so much
Allah
more to
yazid,
like.
Allah yazid.
One thing I know you covered this. I want to give you a topic to cover when you start your podcast. One thing that when I first started following your channel, the thing I was always blown away by was how early you got up. Right, your 4 a.m. start because you would be like, I got 3 hours till Eleanor gets up, and I gotta get this. You know what I mean? And I'm like, when does this brother sleep? You know what I mean?
That's so
And
funny. Yeah.
it is like, I assume it seems like, correct me, I do the math. You're sleeping what, 4 or 5 hours a night?
Yeah. Just about.
It's
Yeah.
always been
Yeah.
like that, and you don't feel repercut. Like all the doctors say you need 8 hours though. You good on 4 to 5 or something, or like, or
كثرة
is it was
الطعام
like
وكثرة النوم.
what?
My Sheikh Zuhair tells us all the time. It's like the two things that really kill a student of knowledge is كثرة الطعام, the too much food, and
Yeah,
كثرة النوم, and too much sleep. Um, so those are the two things that I know it's against whatever all like all of our medical history tells us.
right.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't
Or
get
if
I don't
and
sleep
you
well.
train like physical fitness too, like jujitsu you mentioned, and it's like they're saying if you lift weights, you need recovery, and that's sleep, and so
Yeah.
okay.
I take naps in the day. I take like 20-minute naps. Even my wife is just like, 20, how do you take a 20-minute nap, fam? Like you don't nap like sleep. But I take 15, 20-minute naps and I
Sometimes
get right
that's
back to it.
you can do it. Yeah, I've noticed it does work in a way. You like take it in your car
Yeah.
sometimes, right? It gives that
Yeah.
extra
Yeah.
juice. But is that something you built? Have you always been able to function on this minimal sleep, or is it something
No,
you
no,
built?
no, no, no. It took me a while to get comfortable with it. It took me quite a while. And there are times, by the way, where I will reward myself with just like passing out, right? So there will be times, once, twice, maybe three times a month where there'll be like a Saturday, I don't have anything to do, or that's not true. I have things to do. Like today, as soon as we're done here, I have like 5 lessons I need to record because students have their imtihanat, their test next week.
Right.
But like sometimes when I don't have that, I was like, you know what? I got 3 hours. Like I'm gone, fam. Like yo, hit me up in 3 hours, y'all. Right? So it happens. It
How
happens.
long if someone wants to minimize their sleep? Let's say I'm sleeping 7 hours, 7 hours a night, and I want to cut to 5 or something. Is there a plan? Like, did you strategically slowly lower it, or did you just say cold turkey one day? I'm just going to 5 or 4 or whatever it was,
It
and
was cold turkey for me only because I used to live a lot with my sheikh, right? So I'd leave I'd leave my family and I'd
so
go
this was
stay at my
Egypt.
sheikh's apartment. Yeah, this all started in Egypt. Yeah.
So the
Um,
Egypt, the circumstance, it's like going through boot camp essentially.
literally, yeah. Because
Got
we would
it.
have these douras with the sheikh and we'd have to wake up like 3 hours before Fajr and start memorizing and then like we'd go until midnight the next day. So it was just really intense. But
So
I would say that if someone is going to start, then they should just cut off 30 minutes, you know, uh, from their wake up time, right? And just 30 minutes, okay, and do that for like 2, 3 weeks, and then another 30 minutes, do that for 2, 3 weeks. And it should have a start date. Like it shouldn't be something you just start obscurely. Like there should be something that you're like, okay, I'm starting on the 1st of Muharram, right? I'm
mm,
starting in the 1st of July, right? Like there needs because we as human beings, there's an amazing book I was reading recently. We need to have these start dates. Like
yeah.
we need to, and we need to start with those start dates. Don't push it back, right? Start with that date you set in mind, and then go at it. And may
Sounds
Allah
good.
give you tawfiq.
I mean,
Tawfiq is from Allah.
I
Success
mean,
is from God.
and if you want to reach out to you, where can I hit you up?
Arthur K. Richards. You can hit me up on Instagram.
Okay.
I haven't gotten to the whole TikTok thing yet. I used to say that it's not allowed. Right. I think it's a little bit more now, a little bit more allowed at this
Well,
point.
it's the most supposedly if for if you need to market whatever you're teaching, it is the most viral or has the most viral organic reach. So
100%.
you know
From
what
a
I'm saying?
marketing perspective, it is gold. It
Yeah.
is
So
gold.
I've got to get on myself. Listeners out there, viewers out there, if you do the and then you make sure you check out Arthur's channel. Do you have a Patreon or anything? You have Patreon?
I have a Patreon. I'm not pushing it right now because
Okay.
I haven't been really using it. But Arthur K
Okay.
Richards, you can find me on Instagram, and that's the best place. And we can hit it up, chat it up on
Right.
Telegram and places as well.
And I have a Patreon, so if any of the viewers checking me out for the first time or want to see more of this kind of content, I know how busy you are. I've been trying, wanted to have this conversation with you for so long. I'm really glad we were able to make it happen. But my
Allah
Patreon is
bless you.
patreon.com/Sultans and Sneakers. Inshallah, I'll have to make a trip to Abu Dhabi or something because I guess you're not coming to Florida anytime soon, are you?
I mean, I have to. I go to Jamaica every year with my family. We have a coffee farm in Jamaica, so
That's right. Yeah, we were supposed
I
to talk
try to
about
go
coffee
back.
too, and forget about
Oh, that's
and
another time, fam. Another time, fam.
no,
Another time.
we'll schedule something. I'll hit you up in 6 months. That's a good cadence,
Inshallah.
you know,
Inshallah.
and let me know, and I look forward to your seeing your podcast when it goes live, and you can hit me up for any
Inshallah.
questions on that for sure. All right,
Inshallah. Inshallah. Habib.
listeners, make
Allah
sure you
Akbar.
like, subscribe, follow the channel, check out Arthur on IG. We're out.